So welcome everybody. This is Building a Beautiful Life, I believe session 6. We're coming up on the sort of towards the end of this longer offering. And I'm really excited to have Kim here today. So I'll just do a very brief introduction and hand it over to Kim. Yeah, basically Kim has been one of Dharma Gates, I think of her as one of our kind of informal advisors for the last few years. I meet with her when I have a bunch of questions about nonprofits or how things work, and Kim is one of these people who has a professional background that's really too extensive to list here. She's done everything for everybody, um, and but has a pretty amazing, I think, both background in various forms of service in the nonprofit sector as a Buddhist chaplain, um, professor, or sort of in the academic world, and bridging a lot of different domains, and all the while holding a strong Zen practice in her own life. We practice in the same sort of larger Buddhist community of, it's called the White Plum lineage of practice. So it's a tradition of Soto Zen. And in my my understanding and training in that tradition is that there's this kind of bodhisattva vow that runs through the whole Zen tradition of how do we bring our practice into service of other people, other beings, for the liberation of all beings, right? And so I think I find it beautiful when people are embodying that in their lives, really, in across a lot of domains. And I think Kim is um, a good role model in that. And so I won't do the full formal bio. I think whatever you're called to share, Kim, you're
Yeah,
welcome to share. And but I think generally we'll just turn it over, and you're welcome
see
to
where it goes.
say, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So Sydney, Josie, and Megan, if you can come on video, cool. If you can't, then we'll just hold, I guess, virtual space. Is that what we're doing for you? Um, and thank you, Aaron. It's been fun to kind of connect over the years and kind of have a little touch into what's going on here. And I bridge this funny world between younger practitioners and then senior practitioners. I do some work of end of life care. And then currently, one of my jobs is over at the University of Vermont. I'm reaching out to you all today from Vermont. And oddly, I work in the business school, which is a very strange thing. You don't know me, but if you did, you would be like, what? I direct their sustainable MBA program. And it's really my way to kind of covertly get in there and disrupt and make people. The students in that environment are so passionate and brutally, painfully aware of kind of the world that we're in. And as you would imagine, and I don't think I'm inappropriate in saying it, our business school is kind of built upon a whole bunch of old, white, traditional, male philosophies and practices. And so it is really my little disruptor work at this phase of my life to get in there and kind of have some jazz hands over here while I like support the students over there. So that's the current work. And our graduate students are from 22 to 42. So that's that age group. And like I said, end of life care, that's working with people late 50s into their 80s. So turns out I like people, and so I like working in different domains. I've been on Wall Street, I've run a mental health program. Uh, Andrew, I heard Aaron call you Zuck. I kind of want to call you Zuck, but I don't know you well enough, so if I can. But I was in Cambridge working the mindfulness studies program at Lesley University for a bit. That's why I was like, oh, I love that area. So I've done all these different things. I also worked. Are any of you familiar with Burlington, Vermont? Have you? Little, I see some nods. Okay, we have a big food co-op here, and I ran their HR department for several years when we expanded. So I'm like a walking Venn diagram of like HR and people and culture, all that policy stuff, research and leadership and sustainability. And then, as Aaron mentioned, I am an ordained Buddhist chaplain. So I confuse myself often. But it puts me in a nice position to have this conversation with you. So that's my background. What's kind of cool is we are a small group. I would love to take a few minutes and go around the horn. You all may know each other from attending different workshops, different Saturdays, but I can see your names. But where are you coming from? Tell me, maybe a little bit of this workshop in particular, where questions are on your mind. I have a little structure for us, but I'd either like to include or let lead your questions as we have this conversation for 90 minutes. So, anybody want to jump in and just who are you and where are you coming from? And remember, I am a professor, so I can call on you. Just kidding. I'll do the around thing. I'll take the lead. Zuck, you're in Cambridge. What has you down there, and how has it been for you to be in these other weeks?
Yeah, so I'm here in Cambridge. My name is Andrew Zuckerman. People call me Zuck. And I recently finished undergrad. So back in May, I finished, and I've been living off campus for a few months for the summertime. Um, and I'll probably be moving to New York after this.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been my summer has mostly consisted of job applications and trying to spend time outdoors when I can.
Yeah, yeah. Have you had the rainy summer we all have had in Vermont?
Not too bad here.
Good.
Couple, one or two fours.
Okay, okay. And do your affiliation with Dharma Gates, is this your first round or have you been connected for a while?
I've been around probably since the very early days when Aaron was just starting the organization.
That's awesome. Well,
First
good. I'm so glad
timer.
you're here. And so
Yeah.
I'm just randomly going. If I mispronounce your name, correct me. Jing? I love that you've got this little twirly thing above your head. It's out of focus, so it's not annoying, but it's so cute, actually.
Hi everyone. Hi Kim. Yeah, my name is Jing Wang. This is a fan. Yeah, it's a little bit hot here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta.
Yeah, so yeah, and I'm from China, but I came to the U.S. in Georgia like 2016, so like 7 years ago to get my master's degree of public health. And
Okay.
after I graduated, after 2 years in 2018, I work here as a data analyst. Yeah, first at the CDC, but now I've been working for a pharmaceutical company. Yeah, and then recently, I've been doing nothing special. Today I'm just in the middle of cleaning my home because it's been a mess for a few months. Yeah, and then I just know about Dharma Gates for this I don't know, for this 8 weeks of activity
Okay.
because yeah, and but I started like kind of knowing Zen and meditation since last October, so almost 1 year, and doing some practice on and off. Yeah.
Great. I'm so glad you're here. And my gosh, were you working at the CDC when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
lot. Okay.
Yeah.
Izzy. And Izzy, I'm just going to say it because I'm staring at you. You look identical to one of my dear friends, her daughter. So I'm like, is that
Really?
not her? Oh, yeah. So, like,
That's
I need
cool.
to talk to you so it makes sense because in my heart, I'm like, oh, Gabby. But you're Izzy.
That's funny. Hi. Yeah, I'm Izzy. I'm currently in I'm I've been in Europe for a bit and I'm in Croatia, so I have been enjoying lots of sun and beautiful weather. But yeah, I'm outside of a hostel right now. And I let's see, I found out about Dharma Gates through I go to Wesleyan University, and that's how I found out about this workshop. And I really only started um, practicing last year with the Sangha group at Wesleyan.
Yeah.
And um, one thing I briefly like kind of looked over what like you're about, and I don't know, I think a lot about leadership and power and like how to like when I've been in positions that have felt like I have power or influence, like how to maybe more mindfully like be in those roles. I don't know, I'm just curious
Yeah,
about that for sure. So
that's
yeah,
huge.
I'm
Thank
really
you.
excited to.
Izzy, I'm glad you threw that out there, and I'll ask others, but like I said, I have a whole bunch of stuff over on the other screen. Um, but I definitely want to hear what's on your mind. So power, influence, those are those are, you went right to the varsity level. Those are the big
Mhm.
ones. So thank you. Amy, hi.
Hello, I'm in Boston, Mass. I recognize Zuck from like a couple like Science of Psychedelic and like early Dharmagate stuff. Um, I, like I, to me, like this doesn't feel like oversharing, but it might be. But like I've had like a lifelong history of like depression and suicidality, and like that still very much like influences my thought patterns, behaviors. And I've been into like Buddhism for probably like 3 or 4 years now. I don't really have like an established Sangha, but like my two best friends are all like really into Buddhism. Um, yeah, like I'm like in like a Buddhist reading group of like the Pali Canon right now. I've like read most of it, but like just going through it chapter by chapter with like multiple people has been really nice. Um, I like first started college in like pharmacy school because when I was younger, I sincerely believed that like if I didn't do something that like would secure a high income, that like that it was over and that like I would die in a ditch somewhere. For some reason, that was the narrative that like was like told to me, and I completely believed it. I didn't realize that I had other options whatsoever. And even now, I am in school for something I enjoy a lot more, but I've had lifelong struggles with like academia and school just because I think that like our educational system, our economics, our culture, our society, like all of it is kind of like we are due for a revamp. So, like I don't feel like I love scholarship. I don't love the school system. So I'm in school for sustainable food and farming, which is like I love everything about like regenerative like design, new
Yeah,
urban design, new ways of living, new ways of like eating, because like every time you eat is an act of agriculture. Um, but like I love the subject. I don't like school, so I'm like still struggling of like my questions are usually based on like how much of it should I feel like I'm enduring? How much if I like wait and practice mindfulness, will things transform? Sometimes I'll wait a long time and it doesn't transform, So it's like, is this the final message or is like it gonna change? I'm not sure.
that's gonna be good to let's talk about that. That's a good one. And I love that I know you're not loving studying, but I'm really grateful that you're adding to that pool of knowledge and doing that work. It's so important. So thank you. And you can always follow up by coming to our MBA, but that's more school.
Ooh.
Josie, thanks for coming online so we could see you. Share a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit
of
about
course.
you.
Hello. I actually also have a Cambridge connection. I grew up in Cambridge, Mass. I'm currently on Cape Cod. And I finished my first year at Wesleyan also, which is kind of my Dharma Gates connection. So I know Izzy from school, so it's nice to have a friendly face. Um, and yeah, I'm just kind of, I thought I'd like heard about the course and the description, and I'm at a place where I don't exactly know what's next for me. I'm I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to be out of university and can learn so much, but I don't know what I want to be learning at the moment. So I just kind of, I'm feeling a little like, and this summer also I've left a lot of like open time for myself, which has been great because I've been spending a lot of time outdoors and like trying to tune into mindfulness and just like when I have the space to not be stressed, to like use that in a more mindful way. Um, but at the same time, a little bit struggling with the idea of like transitioning back to school and having more busyness and how to like, live mindfully. So that's kind of where my head's at.
It's a
Um,
lot.
yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah. Now, Megan, I think you're the one in a cabin.
Yes, or not in, outside of at the moment. I tried to put the video on, but then immediately it kicked me out. So
Yeah.
I think this might be the safest
You
bet.
can be disembodied and just a voice. We accept
Thank you
that.
very much.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm trying to be more embodied. That's the reason I'm here, but
Gotcha.
um, no, so I'm on the tail end of the age group this is designed for. I'm 35 and I'm sort of in a place of transition and figuring things out because I've been sort of just post graduation, just sort of making my way as I went. I have a background in the humanities, in art history, and but also in languages, in Italian. And so I started off doing museum work and research, and then sort of over time gravitated toward doing freelance work translating. And so while doing that, amid a lot of personal life changes, like some significant deaths in the family and so on, I just kind of developed this freelance business ad hoc and turned into a semi nomad kind of. I live in Europe half the year and I come back to Wisconsin for the other half. And I've been doing sort of a Rinzai Zen Buddhist practice for about a year formally, but I've been practicing on and off for a few years.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I think we lost Sydney, so I'm gonna just keep rocking and rolling with us. And looking at the outline of this workshop and all the different directions, I think what hearing from you all really distills down for me of some of you career prep and training, and what's the value and how do you know if you're getting the right training, and training being the umbrella scholarship experience, and then those that are kind of in the workforce, how does that shift and have a career of meaning, that can uphold your practice. And we're talking about careers in America, so within a certain kind of framework in capitalism, which capitalism and deep spiritual practice don't usually get too close together, but yet here we are. So I just want to take a quick second, give some feedback, and I might be wearing my kind of academic head or hat for this. Um, you know, some of you spoke about school and am I in the right track? Do I have to be in this track? And the only advice, not that you're necessarily asking, but I want to, unless you really are going to disrupt and subvert the system and play outside of the game, one of my early mentors, are any of you familiar with the work of Margaret Wheatley? She wrote a book in the 90s, in Woman in Leadership. And I know the 90s is not like the 1890s, it's the 1990s. So you're talking 30 years ago. Not all of you were born, but that's not that long ago. And she had an iconic book. It's called Leadership in the New Science. And in working with her, the message of like, you kind of have to get into, unless you're going to just really go over there, which is beautiful and God bless. If you're going to use the system, as we say in our MBA, use business as a force for good, turn the system inside out. There is a certain degree of training that is required. And the hard part of that is, oh my God, we're in the information age. There's so much information. I mean, I just think of Buddhism, and now like my brain explodes of we have access to so many texts that it's like, what do you study? And there's almost one of the skillful means of Buddhism and our spiritual practice of discipline is to have discipline of our focus of what we're putting in front of us. We know that, like, don't watch too much news, don't listen to we know that, like, don't pollute ourselves too much. But a similar discipline is required of how we put our energy to what we're learning. And before higher ed was looked at as just being a vehicle to a job, which I think has happened in over the last 20 years. If I go to school, what job am I getting? And it's expensive to live, so I do understand that correlation. But prior was this notion of, the true liberal arts education of like learning how to think and learn, Aaron gave this intro of me. I am a weird mutt. I really am. And it's started way back in my academics where I braided together different disciplines. I am like the poster child of multidiscipline studies. And they start overlapping in certain points. And then that's translated into being a mutt and multidiscipline in my work world. And so, just for those of you that are not liking the system, it can be a means to an end. Studying what you love can be the most delicious experience. That was my doctoral studies. Like, I couldn't get enough. I was like crazy about what I was studying and writing my papers and doing research and but it wasn't always like that. Amy, I really heard you of like these topics are good and rich and I don't like the system. And within higher ed, there's a couple alternative schools that you can learn in different ways. And yet sometimes it's how do we get through the system to get the degree because then it matters. Actually, a young woman who goes to Williams in Western Mass was just at my house earlier today. We do a little bit of coaching. She didn't want to be there anymore. She's from California. She hates the winter. As a matter of fact, she now hates the summer. Works really cool job down in southern Vermont called the Rich Earth Institute. This is mind-boggling, where they take urine and turn it into fertilizer. But she wants to do different schooling, and we just spent a lot of time talking of that degree in Williams. You taking on that burden will help other people because you're going to go, someone's going to recognize that opens a door. And so I want to name that. And, Megan, you might feel it occupation wise, being 35 and different jobs you've had, or Zuck, some of the stuff you're looking at to do for work now that you've finished school, you may have a perspective of there's a balance. That's our practice life, right? We're always striking balance. So I don't want to come across saying, hey, stay in school and finish it because you should at the expense of your well-being. No. But if it's a path that you can take that then becomes an extra tool or credential for you to be the kind of engaged citizen you want to be in the world, that matters. So I wanted to name that for some balance in the conversation. Does that land okay for folks? Okay. Yeah, Amy, it was you in particular that just jotting down the notes of like school and training. It's hard, not gonna lie, especially if you're just not wired for the system. The system is constructed in an old model of power, which Izzy, that comes back to you in a second to talk about power. But the idea, like, it's a very traditional model, predicated on networking, and a little bit of supremacy is built into the system, not just how your mind works and your learning style. So I just kind of wanted to honor that. A couple of you talked about how does practice fall into all of this? And I think when we were talking about like, hey, when I show up and pick up a workshop, I'm like, oh my God, there's a million things to talk about. Okay, how do I come at this? And so that's why I chose this notion of leading from the inside out, because no matter what you're doing, that orientation is kind of wink, wink, a really important one. It's the expression of your practice. It's the engagement of your intuitive or wiser knowledge. So I threw out there, not to be self-promoting at all, but as a framework, this notion of like being a contemplative leader. Now the argument is, what's a leader? What any leading in your own life is a leader. I live with a dog. I'm his leader. I don't know. I wake up in the morning. I'm a leader. Do I have a team? Okay, I lead that. Okay, I run a department. I'm a leader of that. Yes, some traditional leading, but also leadership can be defined differently. So when I say leading from the inside out, it's almost what's the everyday embodiment of our practice? How does that relate to our thoughts? How does that relate to our speech? And definitely, how does that relate to our actions? And so I think, again, I always talk in Venn diagrams. this notion of what are we interested in, have a passion, or even a calling for. There's some things I do that I don't have a ton of passion for, but I know I'm supposed to do it. And so I do it. And then where does the training come in? And where's the overlap? And I know I'm doing this virtually, but it looks like a nice Venn diagram with my hands here in front of the camera. And our practice. They all are constantly bumping up against, like little cells and nucleus bumping up against each other and settling and bumping up against each other and settling. And that's okay if we know that that's what's happening and we have the cultivation of practice to create space for that to occur. So that's just a little something that comes up to my mind in listening to you all speak, just before we dive any further. Does that make sense? Does that seem relevant to some of your intros? Any questions that spurs?
I do have a question.
Yeah,
I
please, Amy, and then we'll go to Aaron.
You mentioned calling, and like the thing that I've been struggling a lot with is like the concept of no self. Like primarily what I take that to indicate is that like the personality is constructed either consciously or subconsciously. So like once you are able to like make yourself aware of patterns, you can like really cultivate like what you want to do. So like the concept of calling or having anything innate in oneself is like that's always been like I've been trying to like put in like all of the no self stuff with like anything innate.
Yeah, wow, okay, wow, you went there. That's big. Aaron, are you okay to hold your question for a second? Yeah, Amy, I think some of that is like really rich reflection on what does no self mean? And what does it mean? I always simplify things down, not because it's any commentary on you all. It's more about me. How do I make this as palatable as possible? And when it comes to no self, the most simplified way that I can think about it is in a relative way and in an absolute way. And when we look at no self in an absolute way, our conversation comes to a quick halt because our words really fall short. And that's where, inner being from Thich Nhat Hanh's community and, union. And if we take a tantric perspective on this, like that becomes aspirational and idyllic. And these are my opinions. I'm not pulling out my books above me. I'm not quoting. I'm just having dialogue with you. And I think when we're talking about being engaged citizens in the world and we're talking about our careers and building a beautiful life, a human, messy life, we kind of have to lean a little more, or at least give equal weight to the relative sense of no self. And my understanding, and I'd love to hear from all of you about this, and I'm not trying to give a big Dharma talk here, I'm just giving you my 2 cents. But when we talk about no self in a relative way, I kind of think of it as an open hand. Like it's my hand. These are my fingers, my wrists, part of my arm, in this body, my hand. But if you look at that hand, it's not grasping. It's open. It's somewhat relaxed actually. But all my fingers are formed. I'm able-bodied. And in this position, I can offer. And in this position, I can receive. So no self, I haven't disappeared. That's what I meant, like in the absolute way. Ooh, we start getting to some things can go on over there. That mystical stuff I'm going to leave to a different conversation. But in a really relative way, it's about making our way through this messy life that we live, that not everything sticks to us. And in my training of a Zen peacemaker within the White Plum lineage, we talk about 3 main tenets: a mind of not knowing, bearing witness, and an action, whether it be loving action, compassionate action, healing. And so that no self, how that relates in my way of thinking is that mind of not knowing. My mind works. I have to walk my dog later. I'm thirsty, so I'm reaching for my tea. Like things are happening. My mind is activated, but it's not overly sticky. My mind is like this open hand. So like Amy asked a question. I'm giving an answer. I'm not getting all wrapped up into like, oh my God, is that right? Is she still looking at the camera? Did she hang up? Oh my God, what's happening? that's where self and ego start coupling versus I'm really present and I'm a practitioner, so I work on cultivating presence. And that includes my alertness and that includes my humility, all those good, descriptors. So non self allows I'm Kim Nolan. Ta da! Like I'm me. But I don't take so much of the world so personally that it gets sticky. And I don't take things so personally that my open hand has to get rigid. Does that make any sense? Okay, I appreciate the nod. It's heavy stuff. And when we read some of these texts and we hear about this stuff, we get so inspired. And it's what fuels our practice path. Like, oh my God, I want to sit longer. What else can I read? What teacher can I listen to? I mean, that's the yumminess of this. And then we boil it down to our very ordinary lives. Like, wait a minute, I'm still just kind of like living in my little, ta-da. And they both coexist. And there's one aspect of making meaning of that. And I think that's really important. And I've come to realize equally important is making peace with that. I just have my messy little life. And I'm trying to do as little harm as possible. And on a good day, I do good. That's super simple. Aaron, you had something, and Megan, I saw you're in the chat, but let's check in with you, Aaron.
I think mostly I was curious, you described a kind of framework of like, okay, there's these different threads that are bumping into each other. Like there's the training, there's the kind of calling, what you want to offer, and then there's the practice. And you said something quickly about like practice can allow more space for that whole process to occur. And I just kind of wanted to like double click that because I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a sense of what you mean, but I don't know if everybody else has a sense of
I
what.
don't even know if I have a sense. So let's unpack that for a second. I think they're all related, if I'm really candid. And spaciousness and related in a sense, like it might be like a second cousin at a family picnic. So we were talking, Amy and I were just talking about this notion of like really open handed. Well, if my hand is tight, I can't even see you. If I loosen it like there, I can just see you, Aaron. I can't, and Izzy, you're there, but nobody else is in my view. But if I open my hand, I see all of you. And I think it's so funny. There's this gnat that's right in front of my screen, and I'm afraid if I start doing that, you're all going to think I lost my mind, but I might. So, in creating more space, we're also this is more spacious, more things are possible. I can see more. My perspective is different. If I can see more, I'm taking in more data to make different decisions. If I can see more and I can make a broader oriented perspective, that me, that's usually right here, starts moving into we. And if it's really nice and broad, it includes it, which is kind of like the system of which we're in. And so spaciousness means I'm not super sticky. Not everything's personal. I'm still human. I still have my feelings. I want to be human. Oh my God, it's awesome here on Earth in this little human school we're in. Things taste good. Sometimes they taste crappy. Sometimes people are so sweet you want to hug them. And sometimes you're like, could you leave my house now? All that is happening. But it's not necessarily personal because then there's another moment. And something else might happen. And so it's when I said they're related, this notion of creating space is related to not having it be so personal. And so then it ends up not being so sticky. All that is happening while I might have a calling to do something. I do not have a calling to be a brain surgeon. I'm very clear. No one wants me to be a brain surgeon. I also do not have a calling to build bridges because I don't understand how that works. Anyway, but I do have a sense of calling about some things in my life. And what it does and how the spaciousness links there, it frees me up. I'm not pinballing like I should. I shouldn't. I don't know. What if I did? Well, I need a lot of money. I want a lot of money. I don't want to live in a ditch. That would suck. Who wants to live in a ditch? That's horrible. I am called to teach. I like the way I feel. When it works, it's kind of magic. My self, no self, I like magic. And not like I'm going to make my pen disappear magic, like that magical feeling that happens. It's for me, and living in Vermont, it's the same magical feeling I get when I watch. I don't know why they live in my neighbor's tree, but this flock of birds do this murmuration thing. Holy crap. Life stops. It's magical. I like hanging out with magic. Now, when I see that, I don't win the lottery. The earth does not stop spinning. It's very ordinary. So, the more we can create spaciousness, there's also this allowance. If I follow my calling and you follow your calling, I can cheerlead you on. I can have empathetic joy for you. That's outstanding. I can actually maybe be kind instead of like, I want some of that too. Oh, shoot. How do I get that? Now we're getting comparative. Now our ego and our greed has gotten activated. That can happen. I teach some yoga in Vermont, and I met this person who's teaching on campus. I'm like, oh, I want to teach on campus. Oh, easy. But because I practice, I notice, like, hold it. And what I had to do was create some spaciousness to say, how big is the pie? He's teaching that. I'm teaching, this is great. What the hell was that about? Then I can explore. And then I can open my hand, and it's gone. I'm giving very small examples to like environmental and climate devastation. So like I want to keep it to scale. Aaron, do you think that did that clarify it for you or others? That notion of spaciousness, did it make sense? Does it seem relevant to this conversation? Yeah. Okay. All right. Hold on. Let me see what Megan. Yeah. All right. Maybe I should have read that sooner, Megan. You're going back to like looking to create something with skills. And yeah, let me ask a question to the group. I threw out this like very loose word magic. Do you know that feeling? You might have a different word, but do you know when something just feels like, yeah? Okay. Nah. On Wednesdays and Thursdays. What's what's it feel? Do you have a descriptor? Do you know it? And I don't mean it in a let's search for it kind of way. I mean it in a how do we become familiar? Because the reason I'm bringing this up, that kind of benchmark is a really different yardstick for success, especially in our capitalistic society. Not gonna lie, but I need to pay my mortgage. I need to buy food. Like I'm in the society. I'm here. I have a car. But I also like the yardsticks of success of like, oh, I have a little bit of magic every day. I know what's going on. I got it. I am wealthy in that way. And so I'm going to go on a tangent, but let's see if I can bring it back. Are any of you familiar in Tibetan Buddhism with the tradition of Shambhala from Trungpa Rinpoche? Is that a name that rings a bell for anyone? Okay. When Trungpa Rinpoche came to the States, he actually came up to Vermont first. And with creating a meditation community, we know in Zen the zafus, the round cushions. Well, he created these rectangular things that are tall and hard. I don't know. I don't love sitting on it. But when someone said, like, well, Rinpoche, what is this? Why should we sit on this? And he said, oh, it's a gamden. And like he knew. And they're like, oh, wait, what's a gamden? And he said, it's where you sit to become familiar. I'm like, oh, wait, become familiar with what? I'm like, with yourselves. Now, he created, instead of a zafu, a gamden because the American body is less flexible. And he just realized like a whole bunch of people he was sitting with didn't have the flexibility to get down lower, their hips, that was more a physiological thing. But the cushion that he created, he named a gamden, and gamden translates into the word become familiar, or the phrase become familiar. And so when we know things like magic and calling and clear seeing and centered communication, these attributes that I shot out there and with the contemplative leadership, when we become familiar and know those parts of us, yes, we're interfacing in the world, but we're also doing like an internal interfacing. if that connects. I don't know if I brought it back together. In my head I did, but I'm not sure it worked. Checking in for other questions before we
One
move on.
thing, like,
Yeah, jump Izzy.
um, I guess like when I really like that like line of thinking, and I think about that a lot, like trying to know when am I feeling that awe magicy feeling, and like that builds, and then I'm kind of seeing patterns, and that feels great. But I get a little bit stuck when I try to think about, I guess, like why is that sparking that feeling? Like, is that because that's really like my deep self feeling that way, or like is there like, or is that just like some pattern that I have because I was told I was good at that? So of course, exercise, like this type of exercise feels good because the magic is coming from, I don't know. So I guess I can
Yeah,
find like abstractly it makes sense to me to like kind of get to know that feeling, but sometimes I get lost in like thinking beyond that.
totally. And that's like the good news, bad news. Like I love that you're sitting and reflecting so much. You're like, wait a minute, there's a couple nuanced layers here. And what I hear you saying is, when is the magic true and when is it fabricated? Well, who does the Rinzai in the group? I lost track. There's a great koan for you.
Oop, that was me, but I'm
That
not
was
at koan
me,
practice yet.
Megan for the Rinzai. And what I mean by that is, I mean, we could argue that fabricated magic isn't horrible, but there's some shadows to it. And I appreciate your wanting to be cautious of not getting hooked versus just being aware in the moment of something and the feeling is present. There's the striving for, and then there's the present. And our practice allows us to see those moments. And our practice also gets us in tune with, like, oh, shoot, I'm striving. Now, striving for magic is a heck of a lot better than striving for a lot of other things, but striving as practitioners, we want to be cautious about. So you've got a great question to sit with and to, you know, when we sit and we're thinking, I think the body can also give some clues to this. I mean, that moment where you just get goosebumps. Well, ain't nothing fabricated when there's goosebumps. That shit's real. But I mean, we can't walk around with goosebumps all the time. People would think we're a little wacky. And I'm not saying we're looking for a life of only magic. I'm mentioning it as a benchmark. You might have a job. Jing, you were working at the CDC. I don't know. I'm guessing you didn't have goosebumps all the time. That sounds like a really hard job, but it can have purpose and meaning. And then there can be times where, like, that meaning, it doesn't hold meaning anymore. And knowing, though, that's becoming familiar with yourself. Is it in my head, in my thoughts? Is it in my feelings? Is it somewhere else in my body that's trying to share its wisdom? I mean, the body's pretty darn smart, and there's a lot of wisdom. And if we look at different wisdom traditions or even modalities of healing, let's say acupuncture, the body tells us a lot more before it gets up to our head. There's a little speed bump along the way. So if we learn to really quiet and listen to what's happening, we can get a lot of information and data that helps us make different decisions. And then when that data hits with the head, we get confusion. So the C's of contemplative leadership, and I don't know if anyone looked at this stuff, but I had written that there's 8 of them. I'm going to say them now, and let's see if any of them jump at you. Calling, which we talked about a little bit, and which, by the way, when you have a calling, doesn't mean you're calling for your whole life. Just as an FYI. I grew up with my buddy Jeff, who would wear a hat and he'd put a little sticker in it and he would say press, and he just wanted to be a reporter. That's it. He wanted to be a reporter from age 4 on. And when he was 25, he called me and he said, Kim, it happened. Okay, Jeff, you want to give me a little more? Not sure what's going on. He's like, Wall Street Journal. I got a job at the Wall Street Journal. I'm like, holy shit, you are fulfilling your calling. Well, 20 years later, Jeff called me. He's like, I'm not well. I'm not having good thoughts. I don't think I can write another article. I'm like, okay, you're done with that calling. He's like, well, I don't know what else to do. It's the only thing I ever wanted to be in my whole life. I was like, oh, what a great time for you. He's like, I hate you sometimes so much. I'm in a dark place. I'm like, great, get familiar with that. Now, my buddy Jeff ended up like at Stanford and he's a genius. So he's a bad example. But the idea of calling isn't necessarily you get this one thing and that's it for the rest of your life. The other C is care for others, and this notion of service, of wanting, even the students I work with going into business, they're getting an MBA. They are going into business and they're all going to make a lot more than me. But they can still do it with an orientation of, a force for good or care for others. Compassion, which I'm going to assume with you all being practitioners, that's a word that you've rolled around a little bit with and thought about what does that mean and how does it live in my life. Centered communication. And what I mean by that, especially when we're in this model of me, how do I talk to myself? We, how am I communicating with you? It, or use, because there's a couple of us, within the system. Like I work at UVM. I have a team in a department that's in a university. It's a lot of different systems. And so centered communication is how am I grounded? How do I have a sense of what it is I want to say? What are my skills to be able to listen fully so I can either respond or reject or determine what's next instead of having emotional responses? Cultivate stillness. You all know that from being practitioners. Clarity. And I assume I don't want to cast things that I'm not sure about, but the idea of practice and that settling that can occur, whether it's the settling of our bodies and the nervous system and we downregulate, or it's just settling a busy mind and it gets quiet and room enough for like something to pop up. There's this notion that we can have clarity and have some decisions. I call it the currency of time. We don't have forever. And if we are trying to do work around like a wacky world that we live in, there's a little urgency happening, especially if there's environmental, climate, crisis orientation to the work you want to do in the world. Contagious joy in the midst of all the shit that's happening. I mean, Vermont has gotten the worst floods of 100 years. Our air quality, we are now in the top 3 worst states for air because of the fires in Canada. It was not what Vermont was a year ago. We were in the top 3. Now we're in the bottom 3. And in the middle of all that kind of like, holy shit, what's happened politically and now Hawaii, you can still have joy. Sad and joy. That's, well, I'm going to quote Trungpa Rinpoche again. The awakened heart is the heart of sad joy. They're both there. If we deny one, we deny the other. But if we open to one, we open to both. Just something to think about. So I added 3 other C's that I think are relevant to us today. Curiosity. So remember this mind of not knowing, bearing witness, and healing, loving action. The mind of not knowing is really about like, stop what you think is all your opinions and what you know. I mean, we might know 2 and 2 is 4, but maybe it's not. I don't know. But the idea of let's be curious. So I tested that curiosity by going with Bernie Glassman on a retreat to Auschwitz and Birkenau. We were in the concentration camps for 10 days. I have some opinions about the Holocaust. I have Jewish family, so I have more opinions about the Holocaust. And the whole thing was, shh, just be open. I didn't necessarily change all my opinions, but what I did was see some magic in the middle of a concentration camp. It can happen. So that curiosity can lead to some brilliant surprises and then other things. The next C that I bring into consideration for us when we're deciding what are we going to do with our lives is confusion. You got to welcome it because it's there and it's actually really healthy. We know it. We confuse our muscles. We confuse our metabolism. It's called, there was a guy in the 70s, an educator. I think his name was Jack Mesereau, but he called it a disorienting dilemma. And it's where a certain amount of tension happens that your alertness has to come up. And in that alertness, you see things differently. And a lot just falls aside. So actually, I kind of like confusion. I don't like that it gives me a furrowed brow. I'm older than you all, so now I have this weird little wrinkle, but it's a sign that I've kind of sat with some stuff. And then the last inner aspect, or C, is collaboration. We can't do any of this alone. So, we're trying to contemplate, am I in school? Should I be in school? Am I studying the right stuff? Oh, it's going to be hard when I go back in September. Yeah, well, get your team around you. Who's your team? My biggest teammate's my dog that just walked by. I have other teams, Josie, you're at the Cape. You've got it's my favorite place on the planet. You've got nature as part of your collaborator. You have friends at school. You have teachers. We have different things that we can collaborate with. You have a sangha that you're building and working with. Not just you, everybody else on the call. So collaboration just allows us to widen the circle so we don't have to hold these burdens that are put upon us. And I would argue one of the biggest burdens is we think this notion of perfection and we have to get it right. I don't even know what right looks like. Sorry. Like, if you were hoping to hear anything along those lines, I cannot help you. um, but good enough, I understand. And like I said, there's the tenets of do no harm, do good for others. My true mark is do no harm. It's an awesome day when I do good for others. It's a really confusing day when I thought I was doing good for others, but I end up not doing good for others. So I aim for like the do no harm. So the collaboration part just kind of keeps us in check with this notion of perfection, and I'm not going to get it right. And am I doing it well enough? Am I doing it fast enough? Am I doing it whatever enough? So, out of those 11 things, do any jump at you as either of interest or a challenge or kind of anything in between?
I think that the aspect of confusion is something that I could welcome more into my life, and realizing that you can make plans and then they don't always work out, and reality is just a little bit more unpredictable and unplanned than you hope it will be. So I resonated a lot when you brought up that as a point of consideration for life, and
Oh.
I'm eager to like accept more of that.
Well, and with that, I mean, it's certainly not sexy. I mean, who's going to argue with compassion? Yeah, that's a winner. But to put in confusion is like, really? Because it then begs the question, like, what skills? What do I need in my inner landscape? What do I need in order to be with confusion and not have it take me down and accept it as the reality it kind of is? So I appreciate that. Thank you. Any of the others land for anybody?
Um, I actually am on the other side of, I think, the spectrum of sort of flexibility versus sort of a discipline. And so I've kind of been, like I said, going about things sort of as they come and developing and being comfortable with that, but I'm almost too comfortable with it. And so thinking about the calling aspect is actually like honing in on some key targets and skills, because unfortunately, when if you're gifted with a lot of skills, how do you choose if all of them are theoretically useful?
Yeah. Megan, you remind me, in college, I designed my own major. It was the beginning of me being a mutt and wanting to be in all these
I
different
see you
realms.
as a fellow mutt. Yes.
Yeah, I see you. I see you. And so I had to do a thesis, and I old work of Ken Wilber's, and I looked at like the spectrum of human consciousness and areas that you could have arrested development or pathologies and different therapies and modalities to address it. If somebody's having a schizophrenic break, is fine, but meditation at that point is not the right modality versus certain meds for bipolar disorder, which is fine, wouldn't really be the right treatment modality with somebody with an adjustment disorder and having a dark shadow time because they're in deep meditation. So just looking at all of that. And so I just, Zuck, I was you. I just was wrapping up college. And I defend my little thesis. I have no idea how to do this shit. So I defend it. And one of my favorite professors says to me, wow, this is a lot of information. Like, what a great frame. What happens next? I'm like, oh, I'm going to take a year and ski instruct and do whatever because I'm going to go to graduate school after. He's like, oh, that's great. Counseling? I'm like, yeah, definitely counseling. He's like, well, when looking at this spectrum of consciousness and the different modalities, which one do you want to be kind of subject expert on? Oh my God, talk about confusion. The eyebrows come flying together. Totally. I'm like, what do you pick? What? He's like, what? Do you think you're gonna be able to treat everybody along the entire spectrum? You, what? Like, it was this moment, like, all right, all my good wishes makes me super naive. And I'm like, well, no, like, of course not. Yeah, actually, I do. What? And so, Megan, you're reminding me of that of, yeah, I have a ton of talents, but I can't handle an entire spectrum of every type of person that would walk into my room. And so there becomes this, like,
Mm-hmm.
I have to hone in, and that's where that discipline aspect of, everything's about harmony, right? We're always trying to seek balance. And so those of us that are wired more flexible, that's awesome. Like in yoga, I'm Gumby. Well, it turns out I actually have to hold my postures different because I have to build different strength. Just because I'm flexible doesn't mean I'm strong. And so for those of us like we can do a lot of different things and have skills, sometimes it requires a discipline of like, I'm going to pick this track. I'm clear about this track. That means I'm not picking the other 11. That's hard to let go of. But if I pick this one, then I can walk through and get some expertise. And like calling and my buddy Jeff, the reporter, I might pick another one down the road. But right now, so it's a fun way to play with it. There you go. You're getting Kim and her tangent stories this afternoon. You're
Ah,
very,
it's great. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. It's good. I'm happy to hear you bring up the other side of things. Izzy, you started out with talking about power and influence. How does this, is any of that still rolling around in your head of what we're talking about, of how do I embody, a leadership role with, ethics and mindfulness, um, as a young person with some power and wanting to change some stuff in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought about it since I said that. But I think, um, I guess I'm curious because at least right now, it's like in this current moment or in school right now, like I'm not in any of these like quote unquote positions of power. But I guess when I reflect on like my time in high school, for example, I felt like I had worked really hard to gain knowledge and expertise in certain areas that I did find interesting, and then I was able to be in more stereotypical positions of leadership. And but I found within those roles that I kind of lost lost or was I found it difficult to, I guess, embody a lot of these things we talk about, compassion, all the things we're talking about, how when you have it's like I think easy to get separated from like a true like heart when you're tasked with big things, or you you get to, I don't know, like the ego just gets so involved. And I don't really, and I'm just like kind of curious how you, or like how you've managed to, yeah, all the self stuff comes into
Yeah.
play with that too. Yeah.
Well, I will confess I haven't done a good job all the time. So I really love the notion of looking at leadership. Well, there's positionality, right? And so there's this notion of like the king is leader, like I am the one and I will direct all of you, my people of the land. And sometimes that's needed of like somebody step up and run this show. And then there's the notion of the ferryman or ferry person of like, I got the boat, but just come on, let's ride over together. And that's a little of that collaboration I mentioned. Like, I got some skills, you got some skills, we got to get over there. Let's do that. And some of this overlaps with age and human development and maturity. Some of it falls in that. Some of it is just in the moment, what's needed, crisis, that kind of, if there's a crisis, I'm not going to wait and be like, hey, could you bring your boat? No, I know it's on fire. It'll be fine. Just bring your boat over. I'll wait for you. Like, no, I got to step up. Something's on fire. We got to deal with it. And then the third position is more of a shepherd. And as I get older, I'm really intrigued by the shepherd and what the shepherd is like from behind. I'm going to guide. You're out front. That may mean you get the credit, but I'm supporting you. So I've got all these students in an MBA, and I'm not going to lie, they're doing some kick ass work in the world. Good. You go. I got you. I'm going to train you. When you are confused, you're going to come back. I'm going to mentor you and advise you or coach you, but you go do it. I got your back. And so it's just different positions. And so it's understanding what kind of leader, what attributes do I want to embody? And I very much believe who you are is how you lead. If you're arrogant and greedy, like the word narcissist, like individually oriented, that's kind of leader. You're going to be very transaction oriented. What do you got? What do I want? Versus if you're more a compassionate oriented person where service is in the mix for you, that will influence the type of leader you are. I'm not going to argue which one's better or worse. I definitely have an opinion, but they're all fine. That's cool. But who you are is how you lead is one part of it. And then the positionality, your me in relationship to the we has an impact. And just know, again, we're back to the Gamden and being familiar. I know myself, I'm a little more attracted to the shepherd these days. The king, you gotta be kidding me. No, thank you. Way too much attention. Just not working for me. Ferryman, yeah, that's a lot more fun. We can lead together. I like that. So I know that about me. I'm familiar with that. What skills does that require? I've worked on that. And then it butts up against life and the different scenarios. And some scenarios I can create space around, and some I just got to directly go into. So it's a couple of layers happening all at once. And it's great. You have a reference point of high school. You know some parts, some cells got organized and some pathways got built. And then you take it into new environments. And it is a wacky day when something worked here, doesn't work here, and you're like, wait, what do I do now? Huh? How do I lead here? Great, new edge. So, okay. Andrew, I saw you, or Zuck, I saw you lean forward, but I don't know if you were going for your button or not.
Yeah, no, everything. No extra words to share.
Cool. I had wanted to do a little bit of practice together because it is Dharma Gates. Thought that might fit, but we're also like having a really rich conversation. So, knowing, I don't even know what time it is. Knowing there's time happening. Just checking in. Do we want to pause and do any kind of practice? Do we want to keep the conversation rocking and rolling? Just making the most of what we got? What do you think? Or do you have a preference?
I don't want to keep talking.
I had that works. You can all promise me you'll practice when we hang up. I'm okay with that. I brought my little bell, but I won't ring it.
Deal.
Okay, good. Well, maybe I had thrown out some questions. I don't know where I threw it. Was that end up on the website, Aaron? There were some questions that went somewhere into the ethers, where most of my questions end up anyway. How about I throw some out and let's see if any stick for conversation? Does that sound cool? Okay. Okay. How can aspiring change makers, that's you all, launch a career that aligns with values and impacts change? And what I'm asking by asking the question, is that something you think about? The idea of aligning your values and the work you want to do? Do you even know what your values are? Because it's a fancy, sexy word. I'm value-based. And then you do some exercise, like, holy shit, I don't even know what my values are. I mean, like, I want to be a good person. Ugh, I got that. There's a great exercise. Are you familiar with the work of Brene Brown? Any of you heard of her? Love me some
Yep.
Brene. Oh, well, good. I love when you just jump in and we hear it, the end of your word, Megan. That might be my new favorite part of this
Thanks.
afternoon. And Andrew, it's worth checking out. Her work on Dare to Lead. Mwah, really good stuff. But I did some training with her. And it's also fun because she got a wicked Texas accent, and that's just always fun. And so there's a list. It's got to be 60 words. And you have to go, and they're all good words. Like they're all good, human, we all want to be them kind of words, right? You get to pick two. I, of course, cheated. I'm like, I'll pick three. Well, 3 out of 60 is still not a ton. But anchoring yourself and knowing, Gamden, be familiar, what your values are, it's not cement, it's just orientation, allows you to kind of anchor yourself in your values so you can make decisions. So, for example, last year, I worked with 3 women who were new legislators in Vermont. Brilliant women, like intimidatingly smart women. And they couldn't figure out how to work in the legislature. They were getting bamboozled. They just couldn't figure out the system. I'm like, you want me to help you? Oh, that's cute. Okay. So I took them through Brene Brown's exercise on values. Because one of their issues were, how do you know you can't work on Megan, a little bit like you were saying, like you can't be part of everything, even though they're all important. They had to figure out what issues for the state were they going to put their energy toward and lobby for, campaign against, whatever position they wanted. And so it seemed appropriate. Find your value. I'm doing this like ball and socket thing going on here. So you know where you are. And then you can pivot and move around from there. But without having that anchor, you're kind of all over the place. And they felt like they were all over the place. They were upset with their own performance and how to engage in this. Really, they had constituents, they got voted in. And so by anchoring into their values, they knew how far they could range. They also knew, like, God, that is important. I'm not going to work on that. It's not here. And somebody else will. And maybe you all have had that experience, like, I really, really feel strongly about LGBTQ issues, QIA issues. I'm a gay woman, but I spend more of my time working on feminist issues and equal pay. That's funny to me. But I made my value statement. I'm not against. Why would I be against myself? That would be weird. But I can't do everything. So I anchored myself in my values, one of which is integrity, which allowed me to say whatever I choose, I'm going to do with my full being, with ethics and compassion. And the other stuff, I'm going to cheer you. Thank you for doing that, but I can't do it all. Amy, what do you got?
So yeah, like going back to like centered communication, whenever I am like interacting with someone who like shares very different values,
Yep.
it gets really hard. It like really activates me. I feel my heartbeat. Sometimes it's like in a good way if it's like nice dialogue discourse, but sometimes it's like I feel defensive because I have been placed in a defensive position.
Yeah.
You know, like how to like regulate, but also like what does like, you know, like how to like stand up for your values like from a not reactive position.
You know, your answer is in your question, by the way. You already know this. And so I'm just going to reflect back. Some of this is strategic, and we live in a weird world. Like, if I walk around and share all my opinions, I could actually get hurt. Like, it's weird. I don't even understand the world right now. Actually, I'm going to hold that thought. Meg Wheatley asks this question. In this world we do not fully understand, how do we know what to do? Like, so we're not alone. It's a weird world. There are times that there's strategy that the best member do no harm. That might be shut up and don't engage. Shut up's a little violent. Didn't mean, but my point being, like, sometimes it's just can't go there, and it's a strategic move. Other times becomes employing boundaries.
So like, is the feeling of guilt like a good indicator, or is that like you telling yourself what you should do?
You've got to discern that. Guilt, I'll tell you what, guilt. Oh, or truth, any word. We can use this arm. You've got a word, it's guilt. It can be positive, like, oh, when I feel that way, I know. It can also have a shadow side and negative. Guilt is neutral. It's what you do with it. Well, guilt, Anything is neutral. I mean, think of like if I yell, stop. Well, if you're a baby running in the street, it's a real good thing. If I can't control my anger and I yell instead of saying, hey, hold up a second, it's not so good. But the yelling of stop, it's kind of a neutral act. So you have to discern, we all have to discern, what's the strategy here? Are there boundaries that I need to employ? Have I reached a point that I need to engage? And if so, check self, am I best able to right now? I don't know about you all. I'm going to throw out an example. People that you talk to that don't believe in climate change. Have you encountered folks like this? Okay, I don't do really well with those people because I wonder, what world do you live in? What are you thinking? So my first behavior is, thanks for sharing your opinion. What, you don't want to talk? You don't have anything to say? Like, wow, that's a lot. I'm just listening right now. And I can gauge like, oh, you're coming after me, not doing this conversation. Or like, wait, do you believe in climate change? And then I might say, well, I do have some opinions. Is this an okay conversation for us to have? I set up boundaries because I don't want to get all activated. That is the crappiest feeling in the world. then you get, oh, now I didn't do something well, and now I got all this energy in me. I've got to deact. What's happening? So I do a little, when I am able, as much front assessment as I can. Remember we talked earlier about absolute and relative? We were talking about it as no self. Well, this is the same division. In a perfect world, we'd all be able to talk about things and it would be safe and it'd be great. In a relative world, we don't all get along and we need to maintain safety because safety and spaciousness, oh, I'm pointing. Amy's over here, Aaron, you're over here. That's where I'm pointing. Of safety and spaciousness kind of go together also. So when you're in those conversations or you can kind of feel one has been brought to you. Here's another example. I work someplace and I have certain bosses that I have to engage with that have thoughts from the 1950s that are a little shocking. And when I want to speak, I feel a huge urge to be sarcastic because that's the way I express my anger. In professional settings, that's not a really good thing to do. And so I check like, it is a high practice zone for me. Like red lights are on. And I just find my, feel my feet, and I'll say, sir, which I don't call anybody sir, but that's my indicator of like, Nolan, pay attention, you're pissed. Sir, is there something specific I can help you with? Okay, thank you so much. And then I walk away, I'm like, rah, and I gotta go take a lap. So it can be a friend, and you can have your boundaries be a little more perforated, or a family member, or quite the opposite, it has to be very firm. Professional settings. I worked last week in Ohio with a group of executives, 12,000 employees. There's a room of all white men trying to bring DEI to their company. We are in year 3. They have one affinity group. And I just said in this 3rd year, like, all right, you don't have to hire me next year. What the hell is taking you so long? It's not that hard. I'm like, well, it is hard. We don't want to give things away. I'm like, oh, it's hard for you. Okay, I feel that urge to be sarcastic, so let's take a little break and let's get back to it. So I'm giving you examples of it shows up in different scenarios. And when it gets so extreme, then you know you need to extract yourself from a situation or leave a job or have some reaction. But we start with me, we check out the we, and it's within an it, it's nested within an it. Centered communication is really complex and hard. I falsely segregated these attributes. They're all interwoven and hard to act. In real life, they're really interconnected. Great question, Amy. Others? Values. Feel good on that? I'm leaving you with that homework of like, try to identify your 2 top values. It's hard. Do that. When you're looking at work, are you considering like the environmental climate kind of stuff that's in front of us? Or what kind, what are the challenges that you're really considering? I know we talked about schooling and training. Or Andrew, what are you doing when you go to New York?
I'm probably going to be a software engineer.
Okay. And so how does this all play out for you? You're smarty pants. You're one of those people, you do work that I do not understand.
I think I honestly just have homework to do, like rebuild some values in this next stage of life. Um, yeah, this is my first like full-time job right out of school, and so besides getting acquainted to this new chapter of life, I think I need to figure out, okay, how do I want, what are my values now, and how do I want them to play?
Yeah, yeah. And remember I just said I have a boss who's stuck in the 1950s and just some of the things he says. So I told you employing ways that I don't activate and get myself fired by the end of the week. I also have to work on he is human and there's a reason he's acting that way. And so going back to when we started, like how do I not take it personally? I'm interfacing with it. I'm impacted with it or from it. But it's also he didn't wake up in the morning and say like, what can I do with Kim Nolan today to just get her activated? I mean, if he's a sociopath if he does that. I know he's not. So there's the other part of it. So like when you're talking like, oh, I'm starting my big boy pant job. Like I'm leaving campus and going to work. I have to figure out this new chapter. I just, in our last minutes together, I really want to remember to plant that seed. Like, we never know everybody's whole story. You're going to encounter some real doozy people. All of us are. And they're hard and they're confusing. And so, how do we hold our boundaries? How do we keep our seat? How do we keep our heart open? Not, I love this phrase more than anything, employ idiot compassion and be naive and let people just act strange. Where's that balance? And in that balance, is there any feel of, I mean, goosebumps might be too high a measure, but what is your sense of when something's really like aligned? How do you know that? And are you able to like, yeah, that went all right. That feels good. Without then thinking, did I make it up? Did I fabricate? Nope, nope, just right in this moment. Was that okay? Is that all right?
Could I add to that a little?
Of course.
Um, yeah, I had been tempted to jump in earlier when talking about this, like meeting with people with either different values or who are difficult to deal with. And being one of the older people in the group, it just speaks to my memory of how over time these concepts and like relating to other people in a more embodied and physical way, having actual memories of how I've reacted badly in situations or come across tragedy or unfairness, and seeing personal connections suffer from, the results of their childhood abuse and so on.
Yep.
Over time, you gather this physical memory that helps you, if you can channel it, I think, into like compassion is often portrayed as this, very airy fairy, you know, not very hardcore thing. But I think when it's real, it really can be. Like it really, when you think about how learning more about like psychology is something I enjoy learning about in my spare time, and just thinking about all the whatever, like a serial killer, what they went through in childhood. And you've had glimpses of that over time as an adult. Most people have seen, like if they keep their eyes open, they see it like in real life and they feel it. And it's hard when you're younger and it's a lot of stuff is abstract. But I just find that helps over time. And if you can hold on to that and remember the other person is a part of yourself,
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's got their, it keeps coming back to what we were talking with Amy about at the beginning of this absolute and relative thing of in some larger perspective, even the extreme example of serial killer everyone always talks about, like Hitler was a human, he was abused. Like, I get it. And as human to human, those are horrible things. And in a relative world, that is not an excuse or permission to continue that road, promulgating that kind of behavior. And how do we interrupt those systems so it stops? So you can hold both. No different, well, I guess a little different, than holding sad joy. It's all paradox. And that's what harmonizing does. Inner with outer, left with right, self with other, and harmonize and take apart constantly. Oh, I'm conducting. Here we go. La la la. So the idea of having space and compassion is one side, and in the other, the idea of what's appropriate and what's acceptable, and maneuvering between.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought you would. I was hearing underneath what you were saying. So, it's constant, and there's the formal practice on the cushion, and with community, and it's so important to build those skills. And then there's the practice off the mat, off the cushion, and when you're interacting with the others, and you're challenged with things and have to make decisions. You get a job offer that might double your salary, but it's really shit work. Uh-oh. But you have a family. But it's not good ethics. But how do you even approach that? And those are questions in the building a beautiful life. Amy, you ask, and then let's go around, just make sure everyone gets a closeout comment. What you got?
This is just kind of like a side note, but for Vermont, are you familiar with Todd McGowan?
Why do I know that name?
I think he's a professor at the University of Vermont. He teaches in like psychoanalysis, and like for me, the combination of like psychology and like, but particularly psychoanalysis and like Buddhist theory of like how to, because like, like a lot of like harmful actions are done out of pain and like ignorance of like how to deal with the pain. So like psychoanalysis is just like a fun another lens modality of like
Totally. Totally. Yeah, there are so many brilliant ways to look upon stuff. And it comes through us. So, all those different lenses and then integrating it into who we are and how we're going to be in the world. All right. I told you it would go fast. And you promised me you would practice after, so I'm holding you all to it. Can we do a little just check in, last comments, any last questions you're sitting with, anything. I don't want to give you a script. Jing, let's start with you. Wait, what happened to your fan? It's totally gone. Did you do a magic trick?
Yeah, I made them disappear. Yeah, no, just want to focus more on this section. And I really like that you mentioned, maybe in the early beginning, you mentioned that how to know whether it's your true feeling or it's just you fabricate something. I really like that because that's one of my questions, although I forgot to bring it up when I introduced myself. Yeah, but and it sounds to me like you just have to be aware that you are not grasping anything and don't be sticky. So maybe your wisdom will just present itself, manifest itself. So I think that's really helpful. And also you mentioned that if you are in the dark, like your friend, buddy, Jeff, if you are in the dark, that's great. Be familiar with that. Yeah, I really like that because I feel confused and in the dark right now, don't know what to do. But yeah, it's really comforting to hear that you just accept this status. Just be familiar with that status, just accept everything. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, good. I'm really happy to hear that. I mean, remember, I do some work with people dying. Like, they're not changing their outcome. So we got to make peace with what's happening. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, right. And also maybe, sorry, go
please.
Oh, okay. Just one last question. So I like practicing, and you said we should do practice after this session as well. So I was wondering, like, what kind of practice you always tell people to do? Because I know in the previous session, some people ask us to ask a question when we meditate or when we practice, and somebody asked us to talk about a feeling one word at a time. So I was interested in like what kind of, or just sitting there is also away. So just trying to know. I know we don't have time to
That's
do
going to
that.
take 90 more minutes. That's a really big question you just asked.
Okay.
Let me go around
Okay.
the horn and then
Okay.
maybe
Sure.
we'll come back to it. Because
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
actually a
Yeah.
really fair question. We use the word practice like, well, that includes everything. What do you
Okay.
mean? So I really appreciate the question. So
Thank
hold
you.
that.
Yeah.
Josie, who has moved around all of the house.
Indeed, I have. I had lunch, walked around. Here I am.
Sure.
Um, um, thank you, first of all. This is amazing and a great way to spend the afternoon. I just at this age where I'm feeling young and capable and very transient, it is comforting and helpful to think about how do I, be accepting in the time of kind of constant movement in my life, and like whether that's day to day what I'm doing or overall goals or values, like all these things. And like when there's so much input happening in my life of meeting new people and just trying to make sense of the world,
Yeah.
sitting with those things and realizing that, like, I don't know, sometimes I think of meditation as kind of like oh, that if I have time, let me go do this, and I know I'll feel better when I do, but fitting it in, but or just how can I just be more um present and in that moment to moment experience.
I mean, you're
um
saying two things, Josie, that are really important. We have different seasons. I'm not young, but I'm in a similar season where I'm interfacing with a ton of people. And like, I spent yesterday with 10 different people in an 8-hour period there were no breaks. And so
mm,
I had to literally use my practice memory to like transition next. And it was a really hard day. So you're in a season and just you name it. Some seasons aren't like that, but that just happens to be where you are. So remember, like, your position. That's where you are right now. The other part about practice, the words that helped like knucklehead me, we all like practice, no kidding, but oh, it's hard to find time. And a teacher said to me, you don't practice to get enlightened. You practice because you are enlightened. I was like, oh, right. Enlightened people sit. And I don't mean that like I walk around like I know what's going on, but the idea like at the core of my being, in my absolute, there is a wisdom. And I owe it to that wisdom. I owe it to something bigger than my little Kim Nolan busy life to sit every day, even if it's 5 minutes. And so I really want to plant that seed for you of like, please prioritize that. Yeah.
I'll hold that with me.
Yeah.
And I also have a similar question about practice and
Oh my God. All right. Well, we
what
got to
that means.
extend our Zoom time, people. Hold it with Jing. Izzy, what do you got?
I'll keep it brief. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we touched on so many things that I've been thinking about even in the past day, 2 days, and I feel excited and hopeful just to I think trust myself a little bit more
Good.
with I think all the scatteredness, just like allowing myself to choose and like that things will change. So yeah,
And that you
thank
don't
you
have
so
to
much.
know. Mind or not knowing, you don't have to know everything. Yeah, good. I see good things for you, my dear. Zuck, what do you got?
Yeah, there is something you said earlier in the session that just made a lot of sense to me. And it was just, you can try to practice and make something very serious out of your spiritual life, but then you return to very ordinary existence and you have all the stuff of your daily life that you have to take care of. And I feel like that's just a wonderful reminder not to take it too seriously. Like, create space for practice and also handle living a life, because that is a full-time job. And so
Yeah,
that's something that
balance.
I'm leaving with.
Well, and you going to a new city, new job, new people, you're going to be like Josie, like, and it's going to be a lot to juggle, and losing practice could be easy. So the idea of just 5 minutes to like, I'm here, and it can even be like Today I'm going to be the best person I can today. Yeah, like it can be different practice, which I know I'm slipping into your practice questions, but it doesn't have to be complex practice. Sometimes we can't. And then other times we're spacious and we can. So, disembodied Megan, last words for you.
Well, for my personal questions, I'm just going to dedicate myself to embodied practice as best I can and let that kind of keep me going and learn some physical diligence in regard to that while staying open and relaxed and see what comes up. And then I guess just piggybacking on what was just said, that life is too important to take too seriously.
Yeah, and that's that paradox, right? Our one precious life,
Mhm.
and yet don't hold it too tight. Mhm. Aaron, we've gone a couple minutes over, so thank you all because I try to be right on time. Aaron, any last words for you?
Mm, I've just appreciated like absorbing, hearing the whole kind of group's flow and the questions and all of this. And yeah, in a way, I feel like pretty settled in my own process at this point. I'm like, okay, I'm doing Dharma Gates. If I'm not doing Dharma Gates, I'm gonna go meditate somewhere for a long time. Um, it feels very
Very
simple.
clear path.
Yeah. So
Good.
yeah, appreciating everybody's energy
Yeah, me too.
and mhm.
Yeah, thank you all. You have some practice questions. Aaron, would that be one of those Thursday check-ins or to integrate? Like, how do we?
Yeah, well, I want to check in, like, so first, Kim, are you comfortable with like if 10-15 minutes to address that question? Because I
Yeah,
sense
I'm
that
fine.
folks would hang out. So if anybody, I think we'll just keep the Zoom open. I'm happy to stay on for another 10-15 minutes because I feel like that's a big and important one.
Hmm.
And then we can wrap up and, as it feels natural after that. And if you have to hop off, you're of course welcome to hop off. There's
Yeah,
no, you're welcome to stay or go, but it's such a, like, in a way, it's kind of the core. It's like the core question.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. If anyone wants to jump or needs to jump, no offense, please do what you need to. And as far, originally, Jing, you were at like practice. Was it more a question of like, when do you know what type of practice to employ when? Or bring your question back
Oh,
up.
for me, I just want to know what kind of methods you use. Yeah, because for me, in the beginning, when I started, I just sit there and counting my breath. That's my own way to do that. But during the past few weeks, I realized every instructor have different meditation method, and I find that that's really helpful to try different ones. So I was wondering whether yours is the same as others, or if you have your own way, so that I can learn from your way of meditating and benefit from that. Yeah, just wondering what kind of meditation you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy, a lot of different ones to be really candid. I've been doing this for about 40 years. Um, I can most currently, if it's early in the morning before a busy day, just very, take care, Zach. Um, just a really great, and I know I've got a busy day ahead. I know the best way to self-care is a grounding practice, and that's going to be with my breath and my body. If there's, we get off, I don't have to do anything for a couple hours, it hasn't started raining, I might go in the backyard and just do a really wide, open awareness practice. And I mean, thank you, Tibetans, for teaching us about sky gazing. And, that I did as a kid, laying in the grass, just watching. Who knew I was meditating? But I might divide it in the really simple way, simple, of when do I need to bring it in tighter and concentrate and hold attention, a tighter practice, and when do I need different energies and I open it more to awareness. And much the way we talked about values anchoring us, the capacity to hold attention if that is strong enough muscle I've cultivated, that I can then open more widely to a receptive practice of awareness and just kind of being with, but not floating away. I'm anchored. I still, maybe 25% have a sense of my breath. I'm in my body, but it's lighter. And the rest is some of that spaciousness we talked about before, Aaron. Like, just kind of, I'm being there. And there's a blending occurring, and there's an exchange. And more recently, it's been very about just the energetics of it all and kind of spreading out the energies of my body and beyond. That's where I am right now. There are other times I've done crazy nundro and prostrations for days. You know, I've done a lot of different crap. But right now, I just kind of check in. I'm like, okay, what if I'm going on the Gomden? What do I need to be familiar with in this moment and for the day ahead? And if I'm like, well, I'm a little scattered, 10 different people, 8 hours. Okay, hold on. I need to ground myself. Bring it in. And if it's like, no, I feel really good, I'm going to open. And like just have an exchange with the universe. Within those categories are many different types of practices. And there's also like I'm wired a certain way. I am much more naturally inclined toward an open awareness type practice. Just it fits my energy, it fits my orientation. And there are times I need a very tight, bring it in, no, gaze down the nose. And there are other times that like, I'm going to be out to the horizon. And what's so critical, and there's like a loop of information going on here, I have to practice enough to know myself to know what practice to do. So I make like, blah, blah, blah. And that can get a little trippy. So it's an answer and not answer. And Aaron, I'd love to hear your 2 cents on practice. You're the expert on the screen.
That's interesting. I hear some of the white plum, like we practice in the same lineage, and I have a pretty similar. I mean, recently, I think the only thing I'd add, I actually use the 2 same techniques as like primary methods, which are like there's a closer anchor to the breath of the body, and then there's open awareness, or like shikantaza, as it's called in Zen, which is letting go of a specific anchor, but also not. It's good to not do that if you just end up going and thinking the whole time. Then it's better to stay a little more narrow. But then also metta, like metta is amazing. I've been doing a lot of metta meditation, which is like loving kindness for myself, for others.
Yeah.
But a teacher in the Theravada who said something like, I was like, how do you practice really deeply as a layperson, basically? Because she was a nun for a long time. And she said that all of the deepest lay practitioners she know have a really deep metta practice. Because there's something of just learning how to accept, learning how to like accept and love the situation you're in and not fight every little thing that happens.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those 3, depending on the day, depending on the what I'm doing, like if I'm going on a long retreat in a month or so, and I'm going to be doing just shamatha, just concentration, like learn that skill really highly.
That's an important point
But
too.
but there's
Sometimes,
different practices do different.
yeah, to add to what Aaron's
Yeah.
saying, there are times where it's like you want to strengthen a muscle. And like you might think, "Oh, I would love to do Shikantaza, that would be perfect. But I've committed these next 30 days, I'm going to work on metta. And I really want to get some familiarity with that and get some skill around that and just kind of become more proficient so I can drop in with a little greater ease. So there's meeting the moment, there's taking on a challenge to cultivate skill, a little bit of a dance between the two. Does that help, Jing? Yeah, it is. It's an answer, non-answer. I realize that.
I think
Yeah, but that really helps.
a broader answer would be connect to a teacher, connect to a community that can support you over time
Yeah.
in building a
How do
practice.
you guys recommend, like, I feel like so many people I've talked to kind of have like a specific teacher or like some specific person that they really connected with that has like kind of been their guide. And I feel like I haven't fully, like, I haven't found that yet. And I don't know if that comes from going to different retreats and meeting different people and then really connecting with someone, or how you both have found, like, I don't know, or if it's been mostly, like, online through virtual. But yeah, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people I've talked or I've heard from, like, have kind of had someone to at least be most and I feel like that we can find that here or within Sangha groups too, but I don't know, I've been thinking about that.
My 2 cents, and then Aaron jump in a little bit. When Amy asked her question earlier, and I said, "You already have the answer in your question." And I think you answered a certain degree of it. Of by interfacing and being in community, somebody will resonate that you can talk to and say, "I would love to learn from you," or "I would love your support." Now, there's an old guy that lives in Vermont, a crazy guy. He used to be an attendant to Trungpa Rinpoche. And like 20 years ago, I was on a weekend retreat. I'm like, "You are nut." He's like, "I saw you too." I'm like, "Can you come over for dinner?" He's like, "I'd love to." And we've been hanging out ever since. So, just there is some exposure, and then the request can happen. That would be one thing that I would say. Um, or even reaching out. You've read someone's work, you've heard the podcast, and some of the great teachers are full and they're not taking new students, but they can be like, "Yeah, I have a senior student I would love to connect you with." Like, those of us that are deep in this want to like, we want to support each other. No one's going to be like, "Oh, sorry, no, I'm a little too busy for you. Good luck." Not going to happen. Aaron, what's your experience been?
I went to one Zen monastery in college, and then I was like, well, this is really cool. I want to go visit more. And I ended up going to, just by finding the website through some recommendation, I went to Great Vow and in Oregon. And I mean, in a way, like something in that practice, just like that particular, I think of it as like, they call it in Zen like transmission. Like every lineage, every stream of the practice has a certain transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And you might encounter these different like streams of like where meditation or the Dharma is alive. And it's like a little different flavor of ice cream or something. And you're like, oh, like this flavor of what's coming through in these people, this like community, there's sort of a general vibe. And in a way, it's like trying on different flavors. And I've been in a number of environments, and there's at one point, if you do that, you actually just go to be around the people is really the only way, as far as I know, like physically being in the same place to be like, what does this kind of practice do to people's minds who do it for a long time? And then there's a certain flavor that at least will probably hit you. If it's the right one, it'll hit you in a certain way where you're like, okay, I need to learn that. I need to figure out what's going on, because whatever they've cultivated, I want to be a little bit more. I want a little bit closer. Um, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not always I don't know, it doesn't seem to be like a mind thing all the time, like a head thing. It's
Right.
not always intellectual. It's just like a quality of heart or something like that. Just the way someone bows, the way someone communicates their experience, the way they move, you're like, oh, they've got something figured out. Yeah.
I've been in retreats where there's the lead teacher and there's senior helpers to senior students, and it's the guy over there that I'm like, when you just said the way they bow, like, you got something going on over there, don't you? And then Izzy, that's some of the magic. There's someone I've been hanging out with, and one of his senior students showed up. I'm like, I gotta learn from that guy. Day ended, I went to a co-op to grab some food. He showed up at the co-op. I'm like, there you are. And in my head, I'd been like, all right, I'm gonna email him. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do that. Because that's vulnerable, right? And he just showed up. I'm like, oh shit, okay, wow, okay, universe, you're moving fast. Let's do this. And we talked, and we've done, we've had some Zoom sessions. He lives in another country of just some good, questions about philosophy, about practice, about experience, about protocol, all of it. So Yeah. Josie, you had a question about practice, so let's hit that one and then we can wrap up. Did we address it in these other ways, or was there something else?
Yeah, no, I think you addressed it. I guess the only other thing is I'm noticing that like one way that it feels accessible to me to have guided practice is use like insight timer or like something,
Yeah.
to like give some guidance. I'm curious if this also doesn't have to be something you say now, or like maybe if you have recommendations of like certain people to kind of narrow down, because online spaces can be kind of that information overload, and it's hard to know where to start.
Well, that's just hard. It's equally hard to give a recommendation because all those same people are out there. There's style. There's some practitioners that are so scholarly based, and you can really trust in what they're saying. And then some of those scholars, sometimes I just want a big fat heart and two legs. Like, stop with the scholarship. I just need some love in your teaching. So you'll hear that. You'll have a sense of that really swiftly. And maybe if there's some big names, pick up a podcast to just listen for it. And that's that resonance. And there have been times when, like, the big fat heart, I'm like, I need some tech. Like, I want to learn some shit. Let's get in there. And it moves. And I don't give up one for the other. I don't give up ice cream for a chocolate bar. I'm not going to take both. That's a little gluttonous, but I move. You move a little bit. And I think that's perfectly okay. What do you got, Aaron?
I guess one other helpful framework is there's so many names, there's so many Dharma teachers, there's so many people out there, but there's way fewer uh really active lineages that are teaching, right? Like that are like taking on new students in a formal way, or like where so there's broadly there's like some different branches of the three main traditions, which are like Theravada, uh, Mahayana or Zen, and Tibetan Buddhism. And then there's like sub branches there. But if you start to have a sense of like, okay, like, the Thich Nhat Hanh community or school of Zen, they're very influential, they're very active all over the world. And the different teachers from a school might hold something a little differently or share a little bit of a different angle on it, but in a way they're bringing the same transmission, they're bringing the same river, which is coming from Vietnam and coming from Thich Nhat Hanh and coming from, there's a kind of an angle that on practice that's coming through. And so if you if it can simplify the whole equation a lot, like there's only, I'd say, like 5 or 6 really strong Buddhist lineages in the US. There's a lot more that are, you can find, but in terms of 95% of the teachers out there that are really kind of like out, well known, are in a way they're interfacing with one of those kind of main lineages. And that can help a lot, because you're like, okay, I'm like I'm whittling down to a particular resonance, particular flavor. Um, and there's also people who like are very in between. Yeah, like once you get into this, like Jing shared, she goes to Dharma Drum Buddhist Association, which is, Dharma Drum is a big Taiwanese Chan lineage that is active all over the US. And they're actually, Chan is the Chinese word for Zen. And so it's actually extremely similar to the Maizumi, the lineage that Kim and I practice in. Their practices are constructed very similarly. So they all bleed into each other. They're all like um, just they're cousins. It's one big family tree.
I mean, you all are asking such rich questions. There's a primeness to the question. And I do believe underneath the intellect and the words, um, there's an energy. And that does impact, Aaron's talking about transmission of receiving teachings, but there are exchanges happening. And so that, when you, not as cliche as when the student's ready, the teacher shows up. And yet there's some exchanges. So, stay with the richness of your questions, I think is part of what I'm saying. All right. Oh, we got a few more. Okay, good. Okay. Good. Folks, I want to say thank you for spending part of your Saturday afternoon. We overshot the landing by like a half hour, so we really we got in it, and it was really rich. And I feel touched that you trusted enough in this group to share your questions vulnerably and engage. You really engaged, and I appreciate that. So thank you. And whatever practice you do it with your whole heart. Aaron, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cam.
Thank you so much.
Okay, folks.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
good
you. Nice to
you.
meet you.